so many things, like how to love and how to lose and how to choose.
Well, hello, this is Linda Carbonell from Walking Through Life TV show. Once again, I'm going to have a wonderful guest, Mary Adams, and we are going to be talking about the grieving process. Hi, Mary. Good to see you again.
Hi, sweetheart. Good to see you too. I loved our last show.
Yeah, that was good, huh?
Loved our last show. Oh, it was amazing. And I got so much amazing feedback from people about how it really opened the door for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
To take a look at what's going on. Yeah.
Right. Well, I know before we get started on that I have something to celebrate. 8 days without a cigarette. 8 days without a cigarette. Right, Chico?
Yay!
That is correct. And for you, CATV would like to give you this kicking smoking trophy, kicking the habit for being 7 days, now 8 days,
Yep.
Free of smoking. So congratulations to Linda Carbonell, our beloved host.
Aw, thank you, Chico.
You're welcome.
Look, I get an award. Isn't that cool?
Yay!
Look, it's got a cigarette on it. There's nothing in it, though. That's funny.
Linda, so what did you do to quit smoking?
Well, I've been trying to get ready for like a month now. So first I started with looking up hypnosis on YouTube and did a couple of them. I do meditation anyway, so I decided I was going to build a meditation around smoking and why I want to quit and get excited about that. So that worked. And then I also use peppermint oil, essential oil peppermint, and that seems to be working pretty good. But the most important thing I think it's working, Mary, is that I'm so excited about it. I mean, literally I go around the house going, I'm a non-smoker. I got a song I've made up, but me and Chico got to fix it first. But it's like, I'm a non-smoker, all over the place. So it drives my husband nuts, but that's okay. Yeah, but that's what I've been doing. And I've got the patch now. So I'm doing the 21 milligram, and then I think it's next week I start on the 14. Yeah. So I'm excited.
Wow, that's huge. That's amazing.
I know. I've been smoking since I was 11. So, yeah, I think I made up my mind that I was going to do everything I could to help myself do it this time. Yeah.
Wow. It's a huge level of self-love to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it helps me too, knowing that now I can be around my friends that don't smoke, or they don't have to stand like a mile away from me, because I smell like smoke. So, I'm enjoying that, and I can't wait for spring to smell the flowers. Oh, that's gonna be like heaven, I got a lot of roses in my garden.
Wow. Yeah. It's lovely. Wow. Yay, you.
Yay, me. Woo-hoo. I got an award. So, I wanted to celebrate with everybody, with you and everybody on Walking Through Life and Facebook, wherever. I mean, I put down every day on Facebook that I've been quit, and I get so many good reactions and good support from people. I just love it. I think it's great. So, and I want to be there to be support for somebody else that maybe is going to go through that too.
Exactly. That's the biggest piece of this, is that you're being an example.
Yep. And I'm hoping my husband will quit too. So
It's great.
when we go from celebrating this, we also kind of want to transition to maybe the grieving process. Plus, also a lot of us, like you'd said, a lot of us don't know exactly what to say or do for somebody that has lost somebody. So I'd like to start that conversation with you if I could.
Yeah, that sounds great. And where I want to start with that is that grief can come from many different sources. Grief is not necessarily something that comes to us when somebody dies. Mm-hmm. It can be the end of a career. It can be the end of a relationship. It can be retirement. It can be the kids moving out of the house and going off to college. It can be not feeling quite right in your skin. Grief can come up in many different ways. Grief is also triggered by PTSD and reoccurring thoughts of past events that were traumatizing for you. And so when I'm working with people, and this is what I've learned as a minister and as a teacher, I realized about 10 years back that grief was truly the foundation of most addictions. And what I'm meaning by addictions is isms.
Yeah.
And some of those isms are playing video games all the time. Some of those isms might be being on Facebook. Some of those isms might be drinking excessively or drinking a little bit, you know, but being constantly in a state of not connected with yourself. Sometimes that's not paying attention to yourself and being destructive. That is also an ism, not giving yourself the self-love, nurturing that you need. And so because grief is a part of our everyday life, it's something that comes up all the time, but we're not taught how to deal with it.
Exactly.
We're not taught. It's very, very difficult. I feel like they should have classes in grade school that start then. It's
Absolutely.
Life 101.
Right, but absolutely. But this is the purpose of, I know you teach this, and what a wonderful gift that you are giving us here in the Upper Valley, the knowledge of what you have that could help us through grieving and then helping our friends and our family. So again, I just want to say thank you very much for doing this for us, because this is something that's very hard to talk about. You know, it's very hard.
It is. It is. And as a culture and a society, our grief or our belief about death or how things end is all based on what we were taught and the people who taught us. And so some people, you know, I've been to funerals or I've been to events where the way that somebody grieved is they're on top of the casket crying and pounding their fists. And what you find out is that in the family, that's been going on for generations. Some people don't talk about it. I have some of my grief recovery clients that people will not talk about the loss of their loved one, refuse to talk about it because they are so afraid, and they've been conditioned to believe that you're not supposed to.
Yep.
And because of these cultural differences that we have, it can make grief very difficult for the people that are going through it because nobody knows how to act and respond. It's very hard.
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest pieces to understand about grief is that it is different for everybody. Grief is something that has no timeline. It has no ending date. And so grief is oftentimes, for most people, grief is something that we carry with us day in and day out. And it goes unresolved.
Yeah.
And we carry it. And some days we carry it like a huge heavy weight. Some days we're able to put it behind us. And from that grief comes anger, frustration, apathy, depression, and all of those things that we all have. We all have it. And people who come to me and say, well, you know, I don't have a problem with any of that. I don't believe it.
Right.
It's usually covered up by alcohol. It's usually covered up by one of the isms
Right.
to help deal with it.
But what is if we're talking about grieving and the process of grieving, do you have some healthy solutions for people that may be starting the grieving process, something that they can become aware of or that they can, you know, really recognize what they're doing, what the grieving process?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, in that foundation that I just said, I think it's important for people to know. And what's truly important to understand is that by honoring our grief, by owning the fact that we're sad, by owning the fact that we've had something happen that's holding us back, that's really the first step. Not denying it,
Right.
not putting it off on somebody else. And when we realize that we need to care for ourselves through grief, so, you know, and it's different in different circumstances. So if you're dealing with a new loss and you're dealing with a death or you're dealing with difficulties, it feels like a shroud. It's a very, very heavy emotion. And that's the time where you need to reach out. That's the time where you need to connect with other people. You need to get help. You need to find support groups. And you have to help yourself. Grief is one of those things that no one's going to pull you out of it. You have to be in charge of it. And so by owning it and saying, yes, this is mine, what am I going to do about it? It's kind of like a flat tire on a car. Eventually
Right.
Go ahead.
I've heard some people say that saying like a month afterwards, oh, everybody thinks that I should just get over it. I can't just get over it, and I should be over it by now, and I think it's just that they think that there's a certain time that you should be over and not grieving anymore. And like you said, it's a lifetime process. It's not something that just goes away. It might get a little bit easier. It might, get a little bit easier. I know from experience when I lost my mother, And unfortunately for me, I didn't do the grieving process either, which landed me in the hospital because I had a psychotic break because of it or whatever. But I learned from that situation that by saying, oh, just get over it, be strong for everybody else, that I wasn't taking care of me and what I needed. So that's kind of what I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about how can people see the signs and what is it that they can do to help themselves?
Absolutely. And so, in the honoring of the grief, recognizing it, giving ourselves the opportunity to truly grieve. And we're taught to suck, I do not like, suck it up.
Yeah, I know.
Never suck it up, never compress it down. And especially in the beginning of the grieving process, you allow yourself to do what you need to do. I call it emotional ICU.
Yeah.
It's the place where you need to completely cut out the rest of the world, focus on your basic operating systems, eating, sleeping, getting dressed, taking showers, because when you're in that deep of grief, it completely knocks you out of the world. And so being understanding and being okay with the fact, not panicking that you're out of control, you can't think, you can't do what you feel you should do. That's normal. And so what I call it surrender. Surrendering to the grief, allowing it to be real. And as you go through the grief process, obviously you don't want to be taking a whole day to, for something that you need to move through. In the beginning, absolutely. And the way that you get through that is when you feel the trigger coming up. So for an old grief, when you feel that trigger coming up, you go, okay, I obviously am having an emotional reaction. Something triggered it. I saw something out there. It reminded me. You set your timer on your phone. And you allow yourself to truly, deeply grieve for 15 minutes. Go to your car, go to the bathroom if you're at work, get in the stall, and let yourself release the emotion.
So
when we do this,
I was going to say is, so actually taking that time, that 15 minutes to grieve. So what are you doing in that 15 minutes? Are you, I know we're saying grieving or whatever, but what specifically are you doing within that 15 minutes?
It all depends on, so for me, it all depends on the client or depends on the situation. If it's something that I'm needing to let go of and it's something that I'm needing to move on from, telling myself the truth about that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's simply, I had a friend of mine commit suicide 2 months ago. And so for me, I've had to revisit that grieving process. And what came up for me was understanding and letting him go, letting him have his journey, letting him have his experience, letting go of the fact it's not mine. I didn't make the choice. It wasn't what I would have done. It wasn't how I wanted to end it. And the truth is that doesn't matter. That I connect with him now and I have those grieving moments. I send him to the light. I send him love. I send him my friendship. I send him my kindness. I tell him I'm moving on from the suicide. I'm no longer holding on to that. And that's what works for me in this particular situation.
Right. I was going to say too is I know for my family it was so hard to let my mother go. We were right there beside her. We knew she was going, but still afterwards I heard the words, "Well, I wish that I would have spent 5 more minutes with her before I came over," or that. Then maybe I would have heard more words from her, or or maybe I should have given her a hug just before, or like, I hugged my mother right afterwards, and then all of a sudden I hear this, oh, you didn't. And I'm like, yeah, I did. And, so it was a lot of emotions going around there. And I think everybody kind of was like, that can't be the end. That can't be the end. That can't be all we get from her. We got to have more time. You got to have more time. But we're not in control of that. We're not in control of that. But that doesn't mean that we can't have spiritual times when we think about something that we would have said to them and actually say it, move on from there. It's like, I often like to talk about my little blue jay that sits on my mailbox, because that to me represents mom, and then I have a crow that represents somebody else, so birds, animals, whatever, and so that was what worked for me. Other people had to go through the process and then not say a final goodbye for a year later, but that's what worked for them. You know what I mean? That's what I think anyway. What do you think about that and everybody processing and doing their grieving time when it's their time to say the final goodbyes? Because it might not be their time at the time that the person passes away.
Well, I would call that section regrets. It's the regrets of the things we wish we would have done, should have done, could have done. And I met with this incredible minister. For my friend, I got to do part of the funeral, which was amazing. And it was very difficult for me. And so we called in another minister to help out. And when we were initially meeting with the minister a few days after this tragedy happened, I was, of course, distraught. And as Mary Adams, because I was so close to him, there must have been something that I could have done. And this man had the most beautiful thing to say. Yeah. He said, Mary, he said, all of those beliefs of the things you could have, should have, would have done, they're just make-believe.
Yeah.
And there is nothing that you could have done to change this, to stop this from happening, to create a different scenario. This was your friend's choice. Mm-hmm. So, of course, that's in suicide, but bringing it to a natural death, I think of it as the same thing.
Yeah.
There's, and it comes back to this. Do it now. Yeah. Don't wait. Have no regrets. Take those regrets, throw them out the window. There's nothing you could have done. And moving forward, take that energy of grief, transmutation. See, that's the thing with grief that I teach my clients, the art of transmutation. You take that feeling of grief, I shoulda, coulda done something, and when you see someone in trouble, you go reach out. You go do the right thing. You show up.
Yep.
Because now. You use it as wisdom instead of a dagger that you cut yourself with. Mm-hmm. That's what taking this responsibility does. And so we're the only ones that can release ourselves from the responsibility of someone else's death.
And that's something.
And yes, it's true.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's when I finally did that or whatever, I started being able to think about things that I could create that was like, say, my mother liked, like drawing. And then I think about the fairy garden. Oh, she would do this or she would do that, And it's kind of like playing, being a kid again and playing with your mom, And that's what I found from my outlet. That's something that works for me and still working today. I just love doing things like that. And for your opinion, what do you think about that? Do you think that that's another way that somebody can maybe process but include the person that's passed away?
Absolutely. Including them in everything. It's interesting because when I started doing this grief recovery work, you always have belief systems that you come into doing a body of work into it, things that and I did not so much understand the connection from the other side and people telling me these stories of, oh, I feel them. And I'd had experiences in my life, but I'll tell you what, now, after 4 years of doing this service work out there in the world, I absolutely have experienced loved ones connecting from the other side. crazy, whimsical, magical, insane things that there is no way that it's not them.
Yep.
And my clients who were non-believers, who did not, who were not into this at all, a lot of them have very deep and close connections with their loved ones in different ways. And some of them, it shows up as, feathers, pennies, little things.
Yep.
Some of them, they show themselves as animals, like right at the right time.
Yep.
I had one client, his son had committed suicide. We were outside, and my friend said to me, what am I, I want to scream to the universe. I want to tell my son. And I said, tell him right now. And he did, and he's screaming at the sky. And this hawk flew right overhead, right at that moment. And I said, look, there's your answer. And other people go, well, yeah, sure, whatever. But when it happens over and over and over again, guess what? Something is happening there. I don't know what happens in the afterlife. I can't tell you where we go or how we go or any of that. But I can tell you there is definitely a very deep and spiritual connection between us and our loved ones.
That's right.
And if we speak to them, I believe that they feel it or hear it or it resonates somehow.
Yeah. And if for me, it started like the bird would be up on the mailbox and it'd be going peck, 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 and then I might look, it'd go over by the tree, and I'd say, well, maybe a garden over there, so we get little things, but it's not like her speaking to me, but it was like, kind of sensing something that I may want to do. That's something that she might have done. You know what I mean? And I also, I think this is great that we're talking about this. I think it's going to, really help a lot of people. I know people that lose friends and families and, and lose a part of themselves at the same time. So to find a way to love yourself again, that's hard to do, but we can do it. We can do it, It's like you find that, first you find that one thing that makes you sparkle, that makes you in a good mood, and then go on from there and find others, That's what I believe. And talking to you, too, I just want everybody in the audience to understand that you are a minister, so you know about grieving and what the process is and how to go through it.
Yes.
Because this is something that we need to talk about on Walking Through Life for a very long time, And this is a way that people can get the information that they need and they want. I've had a lot of people ask for it. So is there anything else about the grieving process that you want to talk about before we start talking about how people can deal with people that are grieving?
Well, what I want to say is that to get yourself help, to get yourself support, there are moments in the grieving process where you really feel like the bottom is falling out from under you. Your desire to be on this earth, you may not feel that way. And those are the red flag moments that you have to grab your own lifeboat. You have to maneuver yourself. And that's when you pick up the phone and you make a call. And I'm not embarrassed to say that in the last 2 months, I called a hotline for grieving parents. This person who committed suicide was my son for 18 years. I was his second mom. I was every part of his life in many ways. And so I had to call. And because sometimes we don't feel that we can confide in the people around us. Sometimes there's anger and there's things that we can't say to anybody else. And those are the moments where getting someone that you can say, you know what, this makes me mad.
Yeah.
I'm angry.
Yeah.
Great. Tell me about it.
Yes.
That's what we need, is the opportunity to really, so go get yourself that opportunity.
So now that we've talked about the grieving process for everybody, can we talk a little bit about, I often hear from people, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, how can I be helpful? So kind of maybe want to go over a little bit of that, because people are asking a lot of those kinds of questions.
Okay, well, I first want to start out with a few things not to say.
Okay.
Because I hear from my grieving clients, I hear a lot about that, about, oh my gosh, I can't believe somebody said that to me. Like, oh, they're in a better place. Oh, they're out of pain. To the people with a fresh loss, those are not words of comfort. For some people, it might be. But it's generally because they are missing that loved one. They are in absolute shock that they are gone, especially if it's not, a natural death, or it's someone young. There is no justification that they're in some better place at that moment. And so, but also, the key words when what do you need? How can I help? Let's go have a beer. Let's go for a walk. It's not, and it's listening. It's not saying anything.
Mm-hmm. So being a good
it's
listener.
Listening.
Yeah.
Being a great listener, especially in the uncomfortable moments. Being strong enough to hold them so that they can truly say what they need to say. Because what happens is, when you're in a deep level of grief and loss, and this happened to me. I reached out to a few people, and it was too much for them to handle because it was all during the holidays, and they wanted to be in a holly jolly mood. They didn't want to help, they couldn't.
Right.
It isn't that they didn't want to, they couldn't.
Right.
And so it's very isolating. And so as someone who is supporting someone going through grief, realize that after the funeral, that's when it gets hard. And it's hard for months. It's especially, a spouse maneuvering a new life, trying to figure out how to handle everything, and when you have been connected and married to someone, or you have a child pass away, that essence of them, that missing person, doesn't go away.
Right.
And so when you truly understand all of those things, then you can show up. And, in the beginning, making sure the person is eating, making sure that the person is getting out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
If you truly care for a loved one or a friend who's going through grief, get a little bit involved in their life. You are not being nosy. You are, and the other thing, don't tell them what to do.
Yeah.
Unless it's critical and they need to do something different and they're going to hurt themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell them how to grieve or how long they should grieve or what way that they should grieve unless it's destructive. I think that's probably the most important piece because, when you tell someone they're doing it wrong, especially with grieving, you are going to lose a lifetime friendship forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's not worth it.
No.
And it's not right.
Right.
It's not right.
I mean, I thank you for that because now I kind of understand, when friends of mine have people that pass away, how it could be helpful instead of not being helpful. And so, this is wonderful to be able to realize that just by taking a moment and talking to somebody or going over and having a cup of coffee or whatever with them is better than saying, oh, I'm sorry, or, they're in pain or whatever. So, yeah. And Mary, this is such a good subject. I'm sure that we're going to visit this again. I'm sure of it. We only got like 3 minutes left, Chico just said. Isn't that terrible? Just when I'm getting into it, darn it.
Okay, so my message today is this. Allow yourself to move out of grief. Allow yourself to have the love and connection that you really desire and want. And if you are in levels of deep grief, it's time to find some help. It's time to move forward. It's time to allow yourself to live again. Give yourself that opportunity because you deserve it. And you can reach me on Facebook, co-creator Mary Adams, facebook.com, co-creator Mary Adams. And you can also email me at co-creatormaryadams@gmail.com. And Linda will have all of the information for you as well. So, And I just thank you for spending this time with me today.
So, but I want to say goodbye for you today, and we'll talk real soon. But I want to say goodbye to the Walking Through Life audience, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Walking through this life of mine, well, it's teaching me so many things, like how to love and how to lose and how to